Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. Music is my life, you know?
What if one of the world's most famous voices had a side to his life that almost no one knew about for 25 years? Andrea Bocelli, known for filling stadiums and performing for millions, carried a story behind the spotlight that few have ever heard. It's a story of discipline, risk, and choices that shaped who he became both on and off stage. Join us as we uncover the hidden side of Andrea Bocelli's life and career. Secret Nights Revealed. Long before Andrea Bocelli became a recognizable name, his life followed a demanding and mostly invisible routine. From Tuesdays to Sundays, he worked wherever music was needed, in piano bars, private parties, small events, and crowded rooms where conversation often drowned out the sound. These were not glamorous stages. People talked, laughed, and sometimes barely noticed the music at all. Bocelli was not introduced as a special guest or a rising talent. He was simply part of the background, expected to fill the space and keep the mood pleasant. This kind of work carried a high emotional cost. Singing without recognition can quietly wear a person down. There were no standing ovations, no reviews, and no sense that the performance mattered beyond the moment. Bocelli had to give his best voice to people who were not listening closely, if at all. That lack of feedback forced him to look inward rather than outward for motivation. He could not rely on applause to measure his worth or progress. Instead, he learned to judge himself by his own standards, which made him more self-aware and more demanding of his own quality. Anonymity, however, also had an unexpected benefit. Without an audience watching him as Andrea Bocelli, he was free to experiment. He learned how to read a room quickly, adjust tone and volume, and stay emotionally present even when the setting was casual. These instincts would later become essential on larger stages. He was learning how to connect through sound alone, without image or reputation to support him. At the same time, Bocelli was living two musical lives. In his heart, he was deeply committed to classical music. He believed in its discipline, structure, and tradition. Yet reality required flexibility. Classical performances were rare and difficult to access, while popular music paid the bills. This created an internal conflict. He worried that playing lighter music might weaken his artistic identity. He feared drifting too far from the path he respected. Still, survival left little room for idealism. Bocelli continued to perform popular songs at night while holding on to operatic dreams during the day. Often, he played to inattentive crowds while imagining concert halls and orchestras. The contrast was sharp. He had to keep his technique sharp in places that did not demand it, and protect his long-term goals in environments that did not reflect them. This tension forced him to mature quickly, both as a musician and as a person. The emotional side of these years was just as intense. Traveling, late nights, and temporary settings led to brief but powerful relationships. Bocelli often met someone, connected deeply, and then moved on just as quickly. These were not casual moments for him. He fell in love easily and fully, even when he knew the connection might not last. Each relationship carried emotional risk, but he accepted it. These experiences shaped his voice in subtle ways. They taught him how to express longing, vulnerability, and affection honestly. Singing became not just technical work, but emotional communication. The feelings he lived through off stage began to appear in how he sang on stage. And just when this quiet, divided life seemed endless, something began to shift in ways he could not yet predict. Forbidden melodies. For a long time, Andrea Bocelli held very strict ideas about what music deserved full respect. To him, serious music meant classical tradition, formal training, and works that demanded technical control and discipline. Opera stood at the center of this belief. Popular music, by contrast, seemed simpler and less demanding. He did not dismiss it with arrogance, but with distance. It was not the world he believed he belonged to, and he worried that stepping into it would pull him away from the standards he had set for himself. That certainty began to soften through experience rather than theory. As Bocelli continued performing in different settings, he encountered pop songs that were carefully written and emotionally precise. He noticed strong melodies, thoughtful lyrics, and moments that required restraint rather than power. These encounters forced him to listen more closely. He realized that difficulty does not always come from complexity, and that emotional honesty can be just as demanding as technical skill. Pop music, at its best, asked for clarity, timing, and emotional truth. As this understanding grew, so did a quiet fear. Bocelli worried that embracing popular music might dilute his artistic identity. He feared being seen as less credible or less serious, especially by those deeply rooted in classical tradition. Critics and purists were quick to voice concerns. Some questioned whether crossing genres meant lowering standards. Others suggested that accessibility came at the cost of depth. Even when those opinions were not spoken directly to him, he felt their weight. Alongside public criticism was private doubt. Bocelli asked himself difficult questions. Was he moving toward something new or away from something essential? Would blending styles confuse audiences or weaken his voice? These questions did not have easy answers, and he did not rush past them. Instead of responding with defensiveness, he chose curiosity. He listened more, studied more, and tested his voice in unfamiliar ways. Rather than protecting a fixed image, he allowed himself to grow. This openness led to a noticeable change in how he sang. Pop music sharpened his phrasing. It taught him to say more with fewer notes, and to let silence carry meaning. Storytelling became more direct. Each line needed to feel personal, not grand. Vulnerability moved to the foreground. Instead of hiding behind power and technique, he learned to step back and let emotions speak clearly. At the same time, Bocelli did not abandon rigor. He brought classical discipline into every performance, regardless of genre. Breath control, tone, and precision remained essential. What changed was the goal. Rather than impressing, he focused on connecting. He blended accessibility with care, making sure that clarity never meant carelessness. Through this process, Bocelli began redefining excellence for himself. Excellence was no longer tied to category or label. It became about honesty, preparation, and respect for the music in front of him. By allowing pop music into his world, he did not lose depth. He expanded it. And just as his voice began reaching wider audiences, another turning point appeared through the people he would soon sing beside. Forbidden melodies. As Andrea Bocelli's career opened up, collaboration became one of the most meaningful parts of his musical life. He never approached duets as contests or chances to stand out. For him, singing with another artist was a conversation. Each voice had its own role, and the goal was not to dominate, but to blend. He believed that two voices should support each other, not compete for attention. This mindset shaped how he chose partners and how he prepared for every shared performance. Listening played a central role in this process. Bocelli treated listening as an active skill, not a passive one. Before recording or performing, he paid close attention to how the other singer shaped phrases, used breath, and expressed emotion. He adjusted his own delivery and response, sometimes softening his sound, sometimes holding back power to create balance. This flexibility allowed the music to feel natural rather than forced. It also showed deep respect for the other artist's voice and choices. What made Bocelli's collaborations stand out was the mutual respect across genres. He did not see boundaries between classical, jazz, or pop as barriers. Instead, he saw them as different languages that could speak to one another. When both artists came prepared and open, genre became secondary. What mattered was shared intention and emotional honesty. Working with Tony Bennett taught Bocelli the value of phrasing. Bennett had an exceptional sense of timing. He knew when to stretch a word and when to move quickly, allowing the meaning of the lyrics to lead the music. From him, Bocelli learned that simplicity can be powerful when every choice is deliberate. Bennett's calm confidence also showed that longevity comes from consistency rather than force. Barbra Streisand offered a different lesson. Her emotional precision stood out. Every line she sang felt carefully placed, as if nothing was accidental. Bocelli observed how she balanced control with openness, never letting emotions spill over into excess. Singing with her reinforced the importance of restraint, especially when the message of the song is already strong. Celine Dion demonstrated technical stamina at the highest level. Her ability to sustain long performances while maintaining clarity and strength left a lasting impression. Bocelli saw how discipline behind the scenes supported freedom on stage. Dion's work ethic reminded him that emotional delivery depends on physical and technical preparation. Luciano Pavarotti held a special place among these collaborations. For Bocelli, Pavarotti was not an unreachable legend, but a colleague. Singing alongside him removed the distance between admiration and reality. Pavarotti's generosity and confidence showed that greatness does not require intimidation. Their work together affirmed that shared craft matters more than hierarchy. Beyond the voices he sang with, there were voices he never met, but deeply admired. Maria Callas represented drama and intensity. Bocelli respected her willingness to show fragility and risk in every performance. Her singing carried emotional weight that went beyond technical perfection, and that courage left a strong impression on him. Renata Tebaldi offered a contrasting influence. Her voice was known for warmth, purity, and restraint. Bocelli admired her ability to move listeners without excess, proving that control and calm can be just as expressive as intensity. These imagined collaborations lived in his mind as artistic longing, shaping his ideals even without direct contact. And as these musical conversations grew richer, the places where they happened began to matter just as much. Duets they hid. As Andrea Bocelli's career expanded, the places where he performed began to shape him as much as the music itself. Some stages carried immense historical weight. Singing at the Colosseum, within the Vatican, or near the pyramids was not just a professional milestone, but a psychological challenge. These locations were filled with memory, tradition, and meaning that extended far beyond any single performance. Standing in such spaces demanded more than a good voice. It required awareness, respect, and emotional control. Performing in historical settings brought a unique kind of pressure. The audience was not just listening. The past felt present. Bocelli was aware that countless voices, rituals, and events had filled these spaces long before him. This awareness could easily become overwhelming. Instead of trying to dominate the environment, he chose a quieter approach. He aimed to perform with history rather than against it. His focus was not on making the moment bigger, but on fitting into something larger. This attitude grounded him and kept his performances sincere rather than showy. These monumental stages taught Bocelli humility. Fame might grant access, but it did not grant ownership. the setting demanded restraint. He learned that simplicity often carried more weight in places already rich with meaning. Each note had to feel necessary. This discipline sharpened his sense of responsibility as a performer and reinforced his belief that music should serve the moment, not the ego. Yet, just as important were the smaller venues and the difficult nights. Not every concert was ideal. There were evenings when he performed with a cold, when fatigue made focus harder, or when poor acoustics swallowed the sound. These shows lacked glamour and often required extra effort just to maintain control. There was no room for comfort or routine. Each challenge demanded quick adjustment and patience. Bocelli came to value these moments deeply. Struggle, he realized, mattered more than spectacle. When everything went wrong, he learned the most about himself. These nights forced him to listen closely to his own voice, conserve energy, and stay present. They also taught him how to perform without relying on ideal conditions. In those spaces, technique became survival rather than display. Resilience grew from repetition. Each imperfect performance strengthened his ability to recover and continue. He learned that disappointment did not mean failure, and that a difficult night could still hold meaning. These experiences built quiet confidence. He knew he could adapt, endure, and deliver, even when conditions were far from ideal. When Bocelli looks back, it is often the unexpected performances that stay with him. Not always the largest crowds or the most famous landmarks, but moments when connection felt real despite obstacles. A small venue where the audience listened closely. A night when his voice was not at its best, but his focus was sharp. These memories carry weight because they reflect growth earned rather than granted. Adversity sharpened his presence. It stripped away distractions and forced him to engage fully with the music and the audience. There was no hiding behind setting or scale. Each note mattered because it had to. Over time, these experiences shaped his maturity as a performer and as a person. In unglamorous conditions, Bocelli learned what truly sustained him. He discovered that consistency, attention, and respect for the audience mattered more than prestige. Growth did not always arrive on grand stages. Often, it appeared quietly, in rooms few people would remember. And just when the places began to feel familiar, Bocelli's outlook on life itself began to shift in a more personal direction. Stages of power. For Andrea Bocelli, saying yes has never been a careless habit. It is a choice, and often a brave one. Throughout his life, yes has meant opening the door to love, risk, and new experiences, even when the outcome was uncertain. Saying yes required courage because it meant giving up control. It meant accepting that not everything would go smoothly, and that some choices might lead to discomfort or disappointment. Still, Bocelli believed that closing himself off would be far more damaging in the long run. This openness became a way to resist cynicism. In a world where saying no can feel safer and more controlled, Bocelli chose the opposite approach. He believed that constant refusal hardens a person over time. By saying yes, he stayed emotionally flexible and curious. The word "see" was not just a response, but an emotional posture. It reflected his willingness to engage fully with life rather than observe from a distance. Saying yes kept him present, involved, and open to surprise. Creatively, this mindset shaped many turning points in his career. Accepting unfamiliar opportunities led to collaborations he never planned or expected. Some of these partnerships crossed genres, languages, or traditions. Others challenged his comfort zone as a singer. Instead of asking whether something fit his image, Bocelli asked whether it felt honest and meaningful. That simple shift allowed growth without fear. Mistakes were an unavoidable part of this openness. Not every yes led to success. Some choices produced awkward results or criticism. Bocelli learned to see these moments not as failures, but as experiences that expanded his understanding. He did not rush to erase them or defend himself. He allowed them to exist, knowing that growth rarely comes from caution alone. Choosing expansion over protection became a defining principle. This approach also shaped how he treated people. Emotional generosity became a priority. Bocelli cared deeply about making others feel good, whether through music or personal interaction. He believed that connection mattered more than perfection. When he sang, his goal was not to impress, but to offer something sincere. Music, for him, was an act of sharing rather than performance. Each concert was a chance to give rather than display. Such openness came with a cost. Being emotionally available meant feeling deeply. It meant absorbing the energy of audiences, collaborators, and personal relationships. There were moments of exhaustion and vulnerability. Opening oneself repeatedly requires strength, especially in a public life where exposure is constant. Bocelli accepted this cost as part of the exchange. The reward was connection, trust, and shared experience. The human reward of this openness was lasting. Saying yes allowed him to form meaningful bonds and experience moments that careful planning could never create. It kept his work alive and responsive. Instead of repeating himself, he continued to evolve. His voice matured not just technically, but emotionally, shaped by a willingness to feel and respond. In the end, saying yes became a survival code. It protected him from isolation and creative stagnation. It reminded him that life and music move forward only when a person is willing to step in rather than step back. And as this philosophy carried him further, it soon began to shape how he thought about family and the next generation. Fatherly secrets. Becoming a father added a new layer to Andrea Bocelli's life, one that changed how he saw success, risk, and responsibility. Singing with his son Matteo brought these feelings into clear focus. Sharing the stage was deeply emotional. It was not just about music, but about trust and connection. Standing beside his son, Bocelli felt pride in Matteo's talent and dedication. At the same time, he felt the weight of what that path could demand. That pride was closely tied to fear. Bocelli knew how intense the music world could be. Applause could disappear quickly, and expectations could rise faster than confidence. Watching Matteo step into this environment stirred concern. He wanted to celebrate his son's interest in singing while also wishing he could shield him from disappointment. This mix of pride and worry made each shared performance meaningful, but also difficult. Letting go of control was one of the hardest lessons. As a father, Bocelli understood that guidance has limits. He could not shape Matteo's journey without taking something away from it. Even with his experience, he knew that advice could only go so far. Real growth had to come from personal choices and lived experience. Trusting his son meant stepping back, even when instinct pushed him to intervene. Bocelli's awareness of the industry made this process even more complex. He knew how pressure builds, especially for young artists. Comparisons begin early, often unfairly. Being known as someone's child adds another layer of expectation. Rejection can feel personal, even when it is routine. Bocelli had lived through all of this himself, and that knowledge stayed close. Because of this, encouragement had to coexist with realism. He supported Matteo's interest in music, but he did not present the path as easy or guaranteed. Honest conversations mattered. Bocelli wanted his son to understand that success requires patience, effort, and resilience. At the same time, he did not want realism to turn into fear. Balancing honesty with hope became a careful task. There was also the desire to protect without interfering. Bocelli understood that too much protection could limit growth. Stepping in too often could weaken confidence. He chose instead to remain present and available, ready to support, but not direct. This approach required restraint and trust, qualities he had learned over years of performance and reflection. Letting children find their own voice became central to his thinking. Bocelli believed that guidance should offer tools, not instructions. Each person needs space to discover who they are and how they want to express themselves. For Matteo, this meant allowing individuality to come before legacy. Bocelli did not want his name to become a burden or a blueprint. Love, in this context, became about presence rather than direction. Being there, listening, and offering support mattered more than shaping outcomes. Bocelli accepted that his role was not to design his son's future, but to walk alongside him as it unfolded. And as time continued to move forward, this reflection on family naturally led him to think more deeply about age, change, and the passage of years. 60 and reckless. Turning 60 was not something Andrea Bocelli tried to celebrate or avoid. He approached it the same way he approached most things in life, with calm attention and honesty. He refused to obsess over age because he believed it could distract him from living well. Life expectancy has changed, and the stages of adulthood no longer follow the same timeline they once did. What mattered more to him was how he felt, how he worked, and how he stayed engaged with the world around him. Bocelli often pointed to the difference between biological age and chronological age. The number on a calendar did not always match a person's energy, focus, or ability. By staying active, maintaining discipline, and caring for his voice and body, he felt connected to the present rather than defined by time past. This perspective allowed him to remain involved and curious, rather than cautious or withdrawn. Still, he did not pretend that milestones meant nothing. Turning 60 carried emotional weight. Numbers have a way of asking questions, even when a person tries not to listen. Bocelli felt the shift quietly. There was no crisis, no dramatic reassessment, but there was reflection. He became more aware of time and more selective with energy. This awareness did not feel like a loss. It felt like clarity. Rather than resisting age, Bocelli acknowledged it without surrendering to it. He accepted that certain things require more care, more rest, and more attention than before. At the same time, he refused to see age as a signal to slow down creatively. He did not measure relevance by youth, but by intention and effort. His curiosity remained intact. He continued exploring new music, new collaborations, and new ways of expressing familiar ideas. The voice, too, continued to change. Instead of fading, it evolved. Experience added depth and control. Emotional understanding became more refined. Rather than chasing the sound of the past, Bocelli worked with the voice he had, respecting its changes. Living forward became a conscious choice. He did not dwell on earlier success or compare himself to previous versions of himself. Each stage of life brought new focus and responsibility. The goal was not to hold on, but to move with time. And with that steady mindset, Bocelli continued to look ahead, still open to what the next chapter might bring. Andrea Bocelli's journey shows that growth comes from steady choices, openness, and courage, not just fame or talent. From quiet nights in small venues to iconic stages, he stayed present, disciplined, and willing to take risks. His story is about moving forward, embracing change, and letting life shape each chapter. Breaking every rule. Andrea Bocelli has never liked being described as a man who overcame blindness. For him, that language suggests a battle he never agreed to fight. He does not see his life as divided into struggle and triumph, or limitation and success. Instead, blindness is simply one fact among many, not a headline, not a defining story. By refusing to frame his experience as hardship, Bocelli quietly rejected a narrative that often reduces people to what they lack, rather than what they choose to do. This attitude shows up clearly in how he treats his own body and health. Bocelli has often said he avoids doctors and does not build his identity around medical care or physical restriction. This is not denial or recklessness, but a deliberate decision to live without constant reminders of fragility. He does not want to be managed or monitored into caution. He wants to be active, engaged, and responsible for himself. He also resists the public fascination with inspirational stories that turn personal circumstances into symbols. For Bocelli, there is nothing to overcome, only work to be done. That mindset shaped his discipline in quiet but powerful ways. Because he never allowed himself the excuse of limitation, he also never granted himself special leniency. His routines were built on regular practice, focus, and self-expectation. He showed up prepared, not because he had something to prove, but because that was his standard. The absence of a struggle narrative meant there was no room for self-pity, but also no hunger for praise. He expected effort from himself, and that expectation became normal rather than heroic. Physical activity played a central role in reinforcing this philosophy. As a young man, Bocelli threw himself into skiing, windsurfing, and even skydiving. These were not acts of rebellion or thrills for attention. They were expressions of freedom and trust in his own body. Movement gave him confidence and balance, both physical and mental. It allowed him to experience the world fully and directly, without fear defining his choices. These activities also required focus, calm, and control, the same qualities needed for singing at a high level. Later in life, that fearlessness had to adapt. With age, responsibility grew, especially as a husband and father. His wife's insistence on caution reflects a natural shift, not a loss of courage. Bocelli did not abandon risk, he learned to measure it. This balance between boldness and care mirrors his broader approach to life. Stay open, but stay grounded. At the center of everything is a system built on faith, discipline, and humility. Bocelli's faith is not about miracles or shortcuts. It is a belief in time, patience, and long effort. He trusts that dedication produces results, even if those results take years. His discipline is steady rather than extreme. He values consistency, showing up every day and doing the work without drama. Humility ties it all together. Despite fame and praise, he resists seeing himself as exceptional. Talent, in his view, demands responsibility, not ego. If you enjoyed this look into Bocelli's life, like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and comment below with your favorite part of his journey.